The Teamsters are sitting out the Kamala Harris-Donald Trump race, despite the obvious. Let's get into this. Right to work laws, quote, only exist to kill labor unions, said Fred Zuckerman. Fred is the general secretary treasurer of the Teamsters Union, which announced on Wednesday that it would not be endorsing a presidential campaign in the 2024 race, despite the obvious. The obvious being ex-President Donald Trump told the Teamsters straight up in his sit-down interview with the union's leaders that he could not commit to vetoing national right to work legislation if he is elected to a second term. Now, what are right to work laws, you might be thinking? Right to work laws are, quote, a red line for the Teamsters and must be for any union when a candidate for elected office does not oppose such anti worker legislation. It's too important an issue for the labor movement as a whole to be left up to state legislatures. That was our friend Zuckerman again. Right to work laws are essentially anti union laws, making it hard for unions to even operate in the 27 states in which they're on the books, including Virginia, where I'm based. Despite the existential threat that a second Trump term would pose to the future of labor unions in the U.S., rank and file Teamsters voted 59.6% for the union to endorse Trump, compared to 34% backing Kamala Harris. Harris's sin here is that she pledged to sign the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, legislation introduced by one of our Virginia congressmen, Bobby Scott, that would allow unions to hold elections through mail ballots or electronic ballots, making it easier thus to hold elections. And the legislation would also allow workers to sue employers and would weaken existing state right to work laws. So those are two strikes against the Teamsters, their interest versus why they voted the way they did. The press release from the Teamsters announcing their Switzerland stance on the presidential election called the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, quote, an essential piece of labor legislation strengthening union protections. Harris again pledged to sign it. Trump has made it clear he would veto it if it got to his desk, which if he were to get elected, he would get elected with a Republican House and Republican Senate almost certainly, and it wouldn't even get to his desk. So anyway, in addition to pledging to veto the PRO Act, and there's also a legislation called the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act, which again, if Trump were to be president, this would never get through a committee, much less anything else. But this Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act would guarantee the right of public sector employees to organize, to act concertedly, and to bargain collectively in states that currently do not afford these basic protections. So, public sector being, federal government employees, state employees, local government employee unions, if in states where they would be able to organize. So here's what we can say. Good luck to the Teamsters come next year, if there is a second Trump term, because you're not going to get anything close to what you want. In fact, unions will have a harder time existing if that's the case. The bigger issue, though, for next year for these Teamsters, we all see where this election is going. Kamala Harris is going to win, and um, you're not going to have a seat at the table, is what I would say. When Kamala Harris wins, she did sit down on actually Monday with the Teamsters for a lengthy interview, and she pledged at the end of that, well, endorsement or not, she would work with the Teamsters. That's what people say. The last person I would invite would be Sean O'Brien. Um, I mean, Sean O'Brien, starstruck because he got to hang out with Trump at the Republican National Convention, and the Teamsters Union folks, 60% of them going for Trump, a guy who's a scab. Here's what O'Brien had to say, which is really, it doesn't add up to anything that the Teamsters supposedly would want, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, neither major candidate was able to make serious commitments to our union to ensure the interests of working people are always put before big business. That's what O'Brien said. We sought commitments from both Trump and Harris not to interfere in critical union campaigns or core Teamsters industries and to honor our members' rights to strike, but were unable to secure these pledges. It's going to be awfully quiet for you next year, Mr. O'Brien, and for your Teamsters. And despite that, there's a one party that actually supports your workers, even though 60% of your members, I can't figure out why they would say they would support a guy who does not even recognize their right to exist, but that's the country we live in today.